serving it up to you live on the Buffalo Rumblings Vidcast Network. I'm Bruce Nolan. That's Nate Geary, and this is Food for Thought. Ladies and gentlemen, the topic du jour. The Bills won their first preseason game. Not like it really matters, but we're going to talk about it anyway. And developments developed. Nate, how you doing, dude?
Very well. This evening's Friday night crack. I don't know that I like that as the lead-in to the beer, but I'm playing with the concept. Anyways, Bruce, are you familiar with Big Ditch?
I am not familiar with Big Ditch.
Okay, so Big Ditch, first and foremost, is a local brewery down here in downtown Buffalo, and they make a beer called Hay Burner, and it's there wasn't a good joke in there to try to bring it in. But anyways, it's known to get you really drunk very quickly, and it tastes very good. So it's what you'd call the triple whammy.
So it's a Friday beer is what you're saying.
Oh, it's a Friday beer.
It's absolutely fair. I think where you were going for maybe the pour has to be, I think moving forward, the pour has to be on video every single time. I think that's necessary with the correct degree of angle. I think that's important. I think the joke that you were going for there was actually a hey burner, ba-dum, ba-da-dum. I want to know if you'll get me drunk. Yeah, that's where you were going with that. Yeah. Okay.
And good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Welcome.
To everybody.
It is the show of shows.
So we're going to lead this off and we're going to break the ice. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are here in the comments, share with me. Nate, share with me. What's the best thing you had this week, Nate?
I am going to keep it simple, Bruce. We made dinner right before the show here, and we belong to a local farm share here in downtown Buffalo on the east side. It's absolutely fantastic, the freshest of fresh vegetables, and we got some fresh bell pepper, some red onion, and a little zucchini. Put that on the grill next to a couple of chicken breasts that were marinating, and I will tell you, it was the veggies stole the show. I mean, I barely ate any chicken because I ate so much of the onion and the bell pepper, nice and grilled and charred on the outside. Bone appetit, as they say.
I had a pretty good batch of potato soup this week that I was very proud of. I put it on my Instagram. Obviously, if you're following me on Instagram, you already know.
Did I see, Bruce, that you like it shredded?
I do. I put shredded potatoes in my potato soup. I say that as if I'm somehow the one preparing it. My wife is, of course, preparing it, but we like shredded potatoes. I think everyone kind of gravitates toward cubed potatoes.
Yeah.
But I gotta be honest. I feel like there's something to unlock with shredded potatoes. I'm
intrigued, especially with like a nice heavy broth, cheesy broth. Oh yeah. Now, answer me this, Bruce, before we move on. How do you feel about like fresh sweet corn in with the potato, with the shredded route? Because in the cubed route, it fits there because it's got like the round and the square and the texture works. I'm wondering if you would ever go sweet corn in that route, and would it go with texture wise with the stringiness of the? I'm not against it. I think it's a great idea. I might have to ask the GF to try that.
Not opposed to it. Never tried it. Put it on the list.
Bacon,
my theory on food generally is just if you like it, try it once. If you like it again, keep trying it. So
just to keep eating it.
I'm all good. All right. So people in the comments section, Mr. Diggs says he had seasoned pork chops. Pork chops are like a go-to. Pork is like the absolute standard. It's like it's so hard.
Oh my God, Bruce!
To really screw up badly. What's going on, man? You just look like you just had an epiphany.
Screwed up so badly. I forgot to tell everybody that I had a full-on 150-pound pig roast last Saturday, where I was not here on the show on Friday night. Last Saturday I had this 150-pound, 10-hour over an open flame pig, and it was the most unbelievable experience I've ever had, Bruce.
Somehow that slipped your mind.
Shame on me.
Shame on you. Shame on you. Earth Rocker in the comments says, miss a good bag of salt potatoes from Wegmans. Okay. All right. I see ya. Chris Janke in the comments, shredded potatoes equals more surface area, equals more flavor. Bruce, you know what? It's science. It's science, ladies and gentlemen.
You knew this was turning into a science show.
It's Nate Geary and Bruce Nolan, the science guys. All right. Moving back in. So some stories for the week for our beloved Buffalo Bills. the biggest one, the one that ended up becoming a national story and was picked up by national outlets, was Dion Dawkins is working his way back. I think the interesting thing for me was that just shortly after Sean McDermott said he's nowhere close to being where he needs to be to help the team, he's going to take some snaps tomorrow against the Chicago Bears. And that's really working his way in quickly. But Dion Dawkins got a chance to meet with the media for the first time since coming off the COVID-19 reserve list. And he told a story about where he's been, because really it's pretty much mum's the word until that player is able to reflect on their journey on the list, whether that was in close contact, whether they actually contracted it, whether they were asymptomatic. We don't know any of that stuff really, unless someone blabs. In this case, Dion Dawkins had a chance to tell us all about his scenario. He said he was in the hospital for 4 days, lost 20 pounds. It was a pretty sobering discussion, listening to him talk about how sick he was. But I think one of the big turnarounds for me is he went from he's nowhere close to be able to help us to he's going to get some snaps on Saturday. And I think I was in a bad place, Nate. I don't know about you, but I was in a bad place when Sean McDermott said he's nowhere close to being where he needs to be, because I had visions of Bobby Hart dancing in my head, and they weren't dreams. They were nightmares, Nate. So for me, it was, gosh, I sure hope Spencer Brown is a quick learner, because that's where I was feeling very uncomfortable. I don't want to see Josh Allen without Dion Dawkins. And if that extends into the regular season, I was going to be a little bit nervous. So for me, I was very encouraged, and I'm very encouraged at the end of this week compared to how I was at the beginning of this week.
Yeah, and I think it's a good opportunity for Dion to start working in a little bit of game shape. And you hear players all the time talk about it's really hard to simulate the type of movements that you make in a game situation, even in practice or scrimmages. So I think it's important for him to sort of get up to game speed. But yeah, I mean, some of the comments earlier in the week that, you hear Sean McDermott make about Dion Dawkins and his potential availability, you start to worry about, is that in doubt for week one? And I think, seeing him play tomorrow will go a long way. We'll sort of see. I don't know if Khalil Mack's playing on the other side, but talk about I think a preseason test for him. And I think for me, I don't need to see a lot of Dion Dawkins, but I think maybe 1 or 2 series tomorrow, and maybe a couple more series next week than the last preseason game before they switch over to the regular season. I think that makes a lot of sense to try to get him going and start to kind of buffer him in a little bit. And I do. I guess I don't want to make too much of the comments that Sean McDermott had about the potential readiness of Dion Dawkins, because it seems like anyways, they're not going to put him in a game if he's not at least ready to go out there, protect himself, and not put obviously whoever's playing quarterback at harm either. So I think that's a good sign that he's at least at that level. And then obviously a lot of what Dion Dawkins had to say was pretty eye-opening, and I hope eye-opening for a lot of people, right? Hearing the story of a guy that's in much better shape than any of us here, talking about the game, consuming the game, hearing about his stories and his trials and tribulations. It was very eye-opening. And I'm certainly glad that there are no, and hopefully no, long-term ramifications, whether it be heart-related or some of the many reported on long-term effects that can come along with being infected with COVID-19. So the hope is that there are no real true long-term effects that to cause him to maybe not play at the level that we've seen him play over the last 2 seasons, which I think has warranted top 10, top 15 in the league at his position. And I think it's arguably one of the most valuable positions in all of football. The Bills have Dion Dawkins at an unbelievable clip, considering the level of play that he brings them week in and week out, and the leadership that he brings inside the locker room. So to hear him say those things in front of the media, as a leader of that football team, I hope resonates with some of the players that may not be vaccinated on the team, or maybe looking at COVID less seriously than they should. And I hope Dion's his experiences and his candidness go a long way in furthering the Bills' ability to get through this season unscathed, and not having any guys miss any time at key moments this season. So hats off to Dion for working his way back, and thankfully we're talking about whether or not he's going to get preseason snaps and whether or not he gets any snaps this season.
Yeah, I'm ready to see him on the field, and I'm ready to see him kind of get 10 or 20 snaps under his belt, the way that Chris Settle in the comment section is saying. Sean made a point to say Dion took big strides this week to be closer. I think those big strides did a lot for my mental health this week as it relates to protecting Josh Allen's blind side. One of the things that is common in the offseason is these bigger picture discussions around the most important players on the team and the most invaluable player. We just find different ways to list things. We love to list things in the offseason because we're filling the vacuum that is created when you don't have real football to be able to talk about. So for me, I think the thing that was interesting was every single time this offseason I had an opportunity to talk about Dion Dawkins, I always ended up having him a little bit higher than everyone else. And mostly it's because I don't think that Josh Allen is ever going to be an intrinsically quick trigger quarterback. I think that he's always going to want to make a big play down the field. He's always going to want to hold on the ball just a little bit longer. And because of that, I do think Dion Dawkins is going to continue to be an extremely valuable part of what this offense does. And I'm really glad to see him. One of the other things that this brings us into this discussion is the importance of preseason reps versus practice reps. Nate, you were not here on the last Food for Thought, but one of the things we talked about a little bit on that episode was that fans have a tendency to weight preseason games more significantly simply due to access of other data being limited, simply because they don't have the availability of other data. They don't see every single practice the way the coaches do. But if you're a coach and you're thinking, gosh, it's really important to get reps, you see a kind of a dividing line in the NFL right now between the people who think it's really important to get preseason reps and people who don't think it's important at all.
And there are more than you think. It seems like, anyways, there are more people that truly do value it than maybe the common fan or even media member might think.
Where are you at with it?
I think there's definitely something to be said about situational football, especially in a year coming off playing in front of no fans. I think it's important to get out in front of and get out and see an opposing, fan base, whether or not it's, a sellout tomorrow at Soldier Field. I'm not sure that matters as much as it is just getting guys more reps in situations where they're not going to be able to perfectly hear the call coming in on the field, whether that's offense or defensively. I know Josh Allen's not playing, but this is a good opportunity. I'm sure we're going to see some more defenders get an opportunity to play this week. I know Star Lotulelei was sort of posturing himself and getting himself in a position to potentially get some snaps early on in this preseason. So we'll see how that goes. I think there's a steady line. I think I'm very comfortable and how Sean McDermott has approached the offense, in particular the quarterback, Josh Allen. I'm watching, on the screen or was before we started here, Patrick Mahomes played a whole quarter and the drive that led into the second quarter. I'm not sure I want to see Josh Allen do that next week before the regular season. I think it's important to get some reps, some real-time reps, particularly with guys like Isaiah. Isaiah, but Emmanuel Sanders, right? A guy that maybe hasn't had those game reps with Josh Allen yet. Get some opportunities to get the running backs involved in the passing game, which I know that Brian Dable was talking a little bit about today. But that's something that this team, I think, is going to make a concerted effort to do, which is to get the ball in the hands of the running backs in space more often, whether or not that's turning around or handing the ball off to the running back, but potentially getting them involved in the pass game as well. So, yeah, I think at the end of the day, I think there's a fine line. I do believe that playing is important and getting some reps, but let's be honest here. It's not for what we're talking about or what a lot of fans talk about, which is, battles. There are not very many battles left on this 53-man roster happening and playing out in real time. Maybe, Bruce, would you say on one hand, you can count how many guys could potentially one of these preseason games could be the difference between them making or getting cut on this team? I would say one or two guys tops. Like, I don't even think I could fill more than one or two fingers.
Okay, so off the top of my head, how about safety 4 between Damar Hamlin and Josh Thomas? Linebacker 6 between,
if they keep 6,
between Dodson and Adams, the Tyrell. Yep. The House of Tyrell, let's go House Tyrell as the battle.
House Tyrell. Yeah.
I feel like we came across that nickname a little bit late in this process. We could have been having that discussion. Too late. Really missed opportunity.
In April.
Yeah. Absolutely. Missed opportunity, no question. So I think House Tyrell, you got to worry about that. I think that are they going to keep 7 wide receivers? I think that's still a discussion because I think Jake Kumaro is pretty set at wide receiver.
And I think they want to keep Stevenson around.
So are they going to keep 7? If it is going to be Stevenson. I think, are they going to keep a third quarterback is consistently interesting because historically they haven't, but last year they did because of the COVID thing. So I'm inclined to say they're not going to, because earlier in this preseason, Sean McDermott said, we're not going to keep a COVID quarterback, but Mitchell Trubisky is also on a 1-year deal. So are they going to keep somebody like Jake Fromm or Davis Webb around with the idea that they just want to kind of have them around for next year?
I might agree that there's a quarterback, whether it's Fromm or Webb, and I believe it'll be Webb, that stays around and sticks around and is in on the practice squad again this year. I think that makes a lot of sense, the relationship there. But I guess I'm not totally willing to turn the page on Jake Fromm's ability to maybe do some things over the next 2 weeks that might make them say, maybe this is the guy that we want to have in the practice squad, because this is a guy that we believe, to your point, might be able to take over in that backup role. And maybe I'm not sure I view Davis Webb as like a long-term backup. I believe what his role is very good at, which is I think he's a great guy to have in the room with Josh Allen. They're very good friends. He's a good sounding board. I'm not sure that I know that if something were to happen in the thick of a season, if I'm really willing to turn things over to Davis Webb. So the question is, can Jake Fromm play well enough to give you hope that he has that ability? I've got reservations, but I think he played well enough in week 1 to at least say, okay, we're open to seeing more reps and to seeing what you could potentially do with them to make this football team.
Nate Geary, noted Jake Fromm apologist.
That's right.
With all the points.
That is right. Noted. I once, you can find me on Twitter, once comparing him to one Drew Brees.
Yes. The running jokes are very good. They're very strong. Yes. Very strong inside jokes. So I think that's interesting. I think that the defensive line is still interesting. Are they going to keep 11? Are they really going to keep 11 defensive linemen? I think that's still something to think about for me. So there's a couple things, but not nearly as many as there have been in years past, because there's more locks than in years past. And so I think that there are less of them. But one of the things that I am anticipating you seeing moving forward in the NFL that I think people should keep an eye on is the increase in joint practices. I think as preseason games get lesser and lesser, we have 3 now, we used to have 4. I'm sure eventually we'll go to 2. I think when that happens, you're going to see an increase in joint practices because it allows you to get the benefits of preseason in a more controlled environment for coaches. They can decide ahead of time with the other coaches, hey, I want to work on red zone. The Browns and the Giants just smashed red zone stuff for like 2 straight days. And you can't manufacture that type of thing in a preseason setting. You have to hope you get a crack at it to work on that. Now, preseason games have value because obviously the swing of things, the pattern, the okay, let's dress rehearsal, right? Same way that dress rehearsal does. But you can't just run the same scene over and over and over again until you get it right. I actually really like where this metaphor is going. It's a little bit like, drama and theater. And the fact that dress rehearsals are good because it gets you in the normal swing of what getting into hair and makeup and getting into props and doing all that stuff like that you get in the swing of it. But you can't just run the same thing over and over and over again until you get it right. But you can do that in joint practices. So I think we're going to see that in joint practices kind of increasing moving forward. You are listening to Food for Thought on the Buffalo Rumblings Vidcast Network. We promise 2 things here: cold hard facts, fresh hot takes. Don't forget to tip your servers if you're in the YouTube chat with us. YouTube super chats get priority. Let's go grab something real fast. Jason Hawkins says, Bruce, how long do you see Mitch Trubisky playing tomorrow? I think Mitch Trubisky is going to play a decent amount. Yeah. And I think he's going to throw more passes than he did last week. I would bet.
If I'm going to bet on preseason, I think the one thing I'll bet on is that Mitch Trubisky gets more passing yard, at least more attempts come tomorrow. Not for any evaluation purpose, but I think there is a level of it is interesting to me. And I don't know, what I don't fully understand what happened with Mitchell Trubisky in Chicago. I think there's a lot of things you could talk about why it just didn't work out there for him, that a lot of maybe which weren't in his hands. But I do find it really interesting just how much his teammates already like him here in Buffalo. And seeing Diggs, kind of reach out and post on social media about it. I find it really interesting how well liked it seems like, anyways, this early, that Mitchell Trubisky is, considering this is a guy that kind of just walked in here a couple months ago.
Absolutely. Okay. The main course is around, ladies and gentlemen. You went through some appetizers, you went through an hors d'oeuvre, but The meat of the conversation is here with us. And that we're going to go to Mr. Marcel Louis-Jacques, Buffalo Bills beat reporter for ESPN and ESPN.com. Marcel, dude, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I love the commitment to a bit here. I was hoping to see your face again as one of the 18 people on planet Earth who have seen it in person, but it's okay. We'll get there. We'll get there. But
will we?
Love being here.
I don't think we will get there. That's the thing about it.
Oh, we, like me and Bruce, not you. You're not. If you're not in the 18 by now, it's 20.
No, I am. I was before you, by the way. I was before you.
Yeah.
You're not part of the cool kids group, Nate. I don't know if I don't know how to tell you this.
I started the group.
We actually brought Marcel on specifically so that this wouldn't be awkward. It's kind of like breaking up in a public fashion. You always want to take her to a place where she's not going to throw a scene. That's basically what's happening right here. We were hoping you weren't going to throw a scene, but I'm sorry to tell you, we got something to tell you. Marcel and I are now buddies, and you're not part of the group anymore, Nate. I'm sorry.
You misdialed. Let me say that if you thought I was not going to make a scene just because Marcel's around.
I'll tell you what. You teased breaking news. Here's the breaking news. I'm actually the other host of Food for Thought. You are. You are not.
You're out.
To put it bluntly, you are not.
You're out. I'm actually the second co-host here on Food for Thought. Marcel, first and foremost, we start every show by talking about our favorite meal for the week from this past week. So why don't you throw at us what your favorite meal was? Because I know you tend to get around town and try a lot of new places very often. So what was your most recent? Maybe it was something home cooked. I don't know.
No, I am in the process of moving out of my apartment. So the home cooked meals have been, down bad, struggle city, a lot of ramen, a lot of breakfast sausage. We're not going to get into that. It's a little embarrassing, but
yeah, we said best meals, not peasant food.
You said home cooked. You said maybe it's home cooked.
I said tell you home cooked question mark. You don't have to tell us what you've been cooking at home. Just if your best meal was home cooked.
You're disrupting the creative process. You're
No
disrupting the art here.
No
but no, I'm just kidding. The best meal of the week. Surprise, surprise. It was at Bright Smith. Went there on Monday. Got the chicken sandwich. I know that, y'all have seen me tweet and talk and gush over this thing. But the difference here is you can ask for it with the fry seasoning, the Cajun seasoning on the chicken sandwich.
Yeah.
And that turns it from a 10 to a 12. That was the one.
That was the missing piece. Yeah.
They have not missed yet. Somebody, I was out with somebody earlier this weking and, talking to them about Bright Smith. They're like, oh yeah, I don't know about their beer selection and blah, blah, blah. They're beer geek, big beer geek. I was like, to be quite honest, I keep forgetting that Bright Smith is a brewery.
That they do beer. I'm here for the food. I'm at the brewery for the food.
Yeah, I've never gone to Bright Smith saying I'm trying to go out tonight.
Trying to go get some beers. Yeah.
Yeah, let's go tie some back at Bright. No, I'm there to eat. Man, it's the best brewery food you will ever have in your life. So yeah, that's the fry seasoning, the little Cajun chicken sandwich at Bright Smith, meal of the week, hands down.
All right. So Marcel, one of the things I want to talk to you about a little bit is that preseason game 2 is going to have a different cast of characters for the Buffalo Bills than preseason game 1. Specifically, we mentioned Dion Dawkins is going to have an opportunity to play a little bit, and the return of Zach Moss. And so with those two things being markedly different this week than they were last week, in addition to potentially Star Lotulelei, what do you think the Bills are probably going to be looking at working on this week versus last week? Last week, obviously Mitch Trubisky threw the ball twice. That was it. Threw the ball twice. And it was pretty clear that they wanted to work on the run game. That was a point of emphasis going into this. Knowing that they have a different cast of characters, part of me says, okay, they're probably going to do a lot of the similar things because they have a new running back and they want to see Zach Moss and those same concepts. But on the other hand, I think I just said that Mitch Trubisky is probably going to throw the ball more, and he's going to be in there at the same time as Zach Moss. So I have competing priorities here. I don't know what to say. Do you think the plan's going to look differently? Do you think the things that they want to work on are going to look different this week?
I think that the world, and by world, I mean the internet, wants to see the Mitch Trubisky revenge game. They want to see 20 pass attempts in the first quarter. They want to see him toss 200 yards and blah, blah, blah. And it's just simply not going to happen. I think that Buffalo knows what it has in its passing game. There is, if you go through their off-season interviews and press conferences, they never say we want to improve, we want to do this on our pass. They know what they got. it's a different beast. And like you said, without Zach Moss, Devin Singletary got a lot of work last week. Matt Breida got some work. Antonio Williams before he left with that stinger. I think we're going to see a decent dose of Zach Moss during that threshold where the starters are going to play. That's going to kind of be the focus of this this preseason, is establishing that run game and getting it comfortable before that week 1 match against Steelers. I do expect Mitch Trubisky to throw more than a couple passes. The offense this week has been, comically unstoppable. I really do believe that. I really do believe that that's going to be a point of emphasis to really establish the offensive dominance over what is a good and a deep Bears D. But I'd expect to see a heavy dose of Zach Moss early on before we get into Davis Webb and Jake Fromm territory.
Yeah, and I think the interesting part too, Marcel, about this running back field, anyways, this group that they've got, I think Matt Breida brings a little extra juice, at least speed and runaway speed wise, that I don't think they had last year with TJ Yeldon. I think there was a lot of redundancy in how they win in that running back room last year. And I think you get a little bit more versatile with Matt Breida. I guess we didn't really see much of that in the first preseason game. And maybe, I don't know what you've seen from Breida so far in this training camp that maybe suggests what we saw in that game was maybe more of a product of playing behind a second offensive line and not a lot of starters there. And do you believe that there is a genuine role that Matt Breida is going to play on this season, even if all 3 running backs happen to be healthy?
We heard Brandon Beane say this offseason that Matt Breida fills a role that they do not currently have, did not presently have at that time, which is a home run hitter. Neither Devin Singletary nor Zach Moss are the kind of guy that's going to break off the 40, 50, 60 yard runs. They're not the kind of backs that if they get a sliver of space, they can take it to the house. And that's the kind of role that Matt Breida is going to play. But throughout training camp, I thought he's been fine. I thought he's been fine. We haven't seen him do the big plays. We haven't seen the 4.3 speed at full display. He can get to a spot quickly, but I still don't really believe that Matt Breida is the kind of guy that you run between the tackles. And I don't think he offers a versatile enough skill set that when he's on the field, defenses can't more or less tell what you are, what you're about to run. But he's a good pass catching back. Obviously the speed and the athletic traits that they're on display, they're obvious, but and I do think he makes this final roster, but I've never been that really excited about the Matt Breida edition. The stories of Travis Etienne and the takes, they're out there. Everybody knows about that. Everybody knows what I thought about him. I do not think that Matt Breida was, I don't want to say suitable replacement because, who am I to pass
He wasn't
judgment?
plan A. He wasn't plan A.
I really don't think that was I really don't think he's going to be any kind of catalyst. I think he's a nice addition. I don't think he's any sort of catalyst to this offensive success.
You are listening and watching Food for Thought with Nate Geary and Bruce Nolan, here with special guest Marcel Louis-Jacques from ESPN. Marcel, one of the things that you said a little bit ago that I want to ask about is that the offense this week has been, quote, comically unstoppable. When you are watching a practice and you see a unit, whether that's offense or defense, and they're just absolutely dominant, do you interpret that as domination from that unit or a failure of the other unit? So when you watch the offense absolutely light up the defense, which part of you is stronger? Hey, that was a really good play by the offense, or, oh, goodness gracious, we need to be concerned about this defense? Because there's this weird duality that comes with preseason and takes against your own team where you're not sure what to feel. You don't know whether or not you're supposed to be happy that Josh Allen threw a deep pass to Stephon Diggs, or whether or not you're supposed to be sad that Tre'Davious White got burned. You don't know how to feel. It's this strange duality. How do you decide how you should feel and how to report that?
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up. I try not to say things like the defense dominated today or the offense was better, because it's kind of arbitrary, first of all, and I really only get one look at it. I know that there have been a call or two for more technical jargon and more breakdowns about training camp, but in all reality, what fans and what people see from the stadium are different from the perspective that we get day to day at practice. We're not allowed to film team drills. And, I'm a man, I'm mature enough to admit that I can't break a play down completely on first view.
Yeah, watching it one time. Yeah.
That's not, and I don't even think most coaches can do that. That's why when we ask them after the game, what happened on XYZ, they say, oh, well, I've got to go watch the film. I've got to go watch the tape. So it is difficult unless it's very obvious, a one-on-one matchup. If Stephon Diggs clearly beats Trey or Levi on a route, if he clearly creates separation, then yeah, I'm counting that as a win for the offense. If Greg Rousseau blows by Darrell Williams, I'm going to count that as a win for Rousseau and the defense. But other than that, it is really hard. It is really hard to pass that sort of judgment, and that doesn't even stop at the preseason. That does extend into the regular season because we can guess, we can make educated guesses, but it's still a guess as to what exactly players were asked to do and what exactly their assignments were on any certain play. But the reality is we do not know. And even if we ask, they're probably not going to tell us. And that's why things like, you see grades and you see ratings and blah, 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 blah it's so hard to do that as a reporter and as a third party because we are not in that meeting room. We don't know what their goal was for the play. We don't know what they were trying to set up. We don't know what they were asked to do. So it is pretty tricky to find out, but it's one of those, when you see it, when a win happens, a true win happens, you just kind of know. It's difficult to describe. It's difficult to explain, but when you see it, it's pretty apparent.
I'm Nate Geary. My co-host is Bruce Nolan. This is Food for Thought podcast on the Buffalo Rumblings podcast and videocast network. Joining us, obviously, here now live is Marcel Louis-Jacques of ESPN. And Marcel, the kind of next phase, and you mentioned his name, Gregory Rousseau, the Bills' first round pick in this April's draft. I think obviously probably turned some heads for people that haven't been watching in camp and watching him play on a down by down basis. I think we're starting to see the presence of guys like Mario Addison and Jerry Hughes and sort of his development early on here, because there's only so much position coaches can do on a day-to-day basis. You really have to rely on those veteran players, which is why, by the way, Mario Addison is still here and will likely make the team. It's probably less now about what he brings this team on the field. Is he going to be a guy that can bring 10 sacks, but is he a guy that can help Gregory Rousseau grow in his rookie season? And obviously people that were watching on NFL Network got their first glimpse of Gregory Rousseau. I was talking about this with you earlier. I think there was this sense with Rousseau that maybe it was luck. Maybe it was, we don't know exactly what it was to get 15 and a half sacks in his first year in Miami. What have you seen in the preseason in that game last week against Penei Sewell, by the way, who's a top 5 pick? And what do you see now with at least every day in practice that suggests this is not only a guy, because listen, Marcel, a lot of people were saying, well, Boogie Basham's going to be the guy that is maybe ready to play right away, right? Like that was the narrative going to training camp. Basham's the guy that's going to be out there right away. He can bump inside. Maybe we see some situational pass rush situations from Gregory Rousseau, but this isn't a guy that's going to push to start. Are we not talking about that enough as a potential that Rousseau might be one of the more dominating figures on the edge for this team?
Yeah, I mean, there was also a narrative that Spencer Brown was going to start at right tackle. So, like, it's meaningless to put these things through directly after the draft. But no, we did talk about this earlier, and the main point was you don't luck into 15 and a half sacks. That is an extraordinary number at any level of the game, especially for a guy that was his first full year at the position. He's a converted wide receiver and safety. What you're seeing is you're seeing the footwork, you're seeing the length, you're seeing the bend in athleticism, you're seeing the technically sound play from Greg Rousseau throughout the preseason. And the NFL is it's a kind of a morbid league in some ways, where careers have been made based on injuries to other players. And I think in injury, the NFI list designation for Jerry Hughes, I think that created a massive opportunity for Greg Rousseau to get more reps where they ordinarily would not have been there. So he is used to practicing alongside starters. He's used to practicing against starters. And even from, the early days, where it's his first real team play in roughly 2 years, you could tell, okay, there's a lot of potential here. There's a lot of talent here. And, for him to, on his first true pass rush, or one of his first true pass rushes of his NFL career, for him to beat Penei Sewell, who a lot of people have pegged as an all-pro Hall of Fame caliber talent, entering the draft, for him to beat a player of that caliber, I thought was impressive. Regardless of, I've seen some skepticism as to like whether he really brought him down or if Goff just kind of ran into it. It doesn't matter. He won the pass rush. He won the pass rush. You don't always have to necessarily bring a quarterback down. You have to win your pass rush and create pressure. And that is, when you do something like that, when you've got guys like Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, Trey White, Levi Wallace, all certified ball hawks, you don't have to bring the quarterback down. You just have to force him to make a decision before he's truly comfortable making it. And I think Greg Rousseau has a high probability of doing that on a consistent basis throughout his rookie year. I really am I love what the Bills have done on their defensive line this year. We heard Sean McDermott say after the game that they were intentional in improving that part of the ball. And, while maybe the casual observer of the game thinks, okay, improving the line means adding a JJ Watt or adding a Yannick Ngakoue or, adding a Carl Lawson or a guy who, you think can get double-digit sacks. No, I think perhaps maybe more effective is adding depth to the line to where you can send wave after wave after wave of pass rusher at opposing quarterbacks and wear enough offensive line down over the course of the game. And that's been one of the most noticeable things I've seen in practice during training camp is, as Bruce said, where do you say, okay, the offense was good versus the defense is bad? You think, okay, wow, the second team offensive line is really struggling. The third team is really struggling. No, they're not necessarily struggling. They're just playing against players who could very possibly start for Buffalo. Like it's going 10 deep right now. And when you've got, and I'm just pulling names out of a hat, this is not indicative of where they've been practicing, but when you've got like, when you've got Steven Gonzalez playing against F.A. Obata, that's not a fair matchup for Steven Gonzalez. F.A. Obata is a starting caliber talent for some team. And so it is noticeable. It is obvious how much depth the Bills have on their defensive line. I believe I projected 6 defensive ends making this final 53-man roster. We might have to push that up to 7. Like I think it's really hard to leave a guy like Obata off the roster. It really is. Like I think fans are going to see a completely revitalized unit from this team this coming season.
And that's one of the things that Nate and I were talking about before you hopped on was, are they going to keep 7? Is it blasphemous for us to even suggest that potentially 11 defensive linemen make this team? And you got to have to make cuts everywhere else, but it is the strongest part of this team. It is a part of the team that was shifted around the most in the offseason. And if you look at Sean McDermott's success with previous teams, it was exactly what you said. It wasn't a singular dominant talent. It was waves and waves and waves. It was that way in Carolina. It was that way when he had success in Philadelphia. It was that way everywhere he's been where he's had pass rush success. So I want to take something that you were talking about in regards to Gregory Rousseau, and I want to spin that into a little philosophical question. And it was specifically about the pro-ready label, the ready to contribute year one label. And I think that the reason that got put on Boogie Basham and not put on Gregory Rousseau is only due to college games played. It was just experience level. And I'm starting to wonder if maybe experience level in college is starting to pollute us a little bit, that we start to tag these people with pro-ready labels, when in reality, if you have a special trait that can work at the next level, you can be at least partially pro-ready day one. If you have some special trait, I mean, think about all the different times when you hear a defensive line coach or a defensive coordinator, and they are talking about a pass rusher, and they'll say something along the lines of, well, early on in his career, he was just relying on his athleticism, but now he's really started to build up his repertoire. He's really started to develop his pass rush moves and his counters. Ron Rivera said the exact same thing about Chase Young just recently, which is crazy because Chase Young was extremely technically refined coming out of college. But that's a common phrase. Maybe maybe pro ready should be utilized a little bit differently. Instead of just, he was really experienced in college. Instead of that, we should be taking a different approach to pro readiness. And it is, if you have a trait that can cause you to win right now, you're pro ready. Am I crazy or what?
No, I don't think you're crazy. And I think like this spills into not just college football. I think this is, we see it a lot in college basketball as well. And guys like, you know, like maybe Donovan Mitchell, who was, or anybody really who plays for Duke, they're playing within a system. And I think really context matters there. You know, what they're asked to do matters, but elite traits really stand out. And that's where the upper echelon of scouting staffs and pro scouting staffs really show themselves. And I think the Bills have an upper echelon front office staff to be able to find guys like Greg Rousseau at the end of the third round or first round, to find guys like Boogie Basham in the second round. I think that it shows how effectively, how efficiently these guys really do their homework. And, you know, he did get a lot of the pro ready hype because he played more. You know, Rousseau didn't have the tape and all the length and the experience and the games played and blah. But I wrote about this a little bit when they signed Josh Allen. I think that this front office has an immeasurable amount of confidence in their coaching staff to develop players. We hear it all the time, and I don't think it's just grammar. Like, I don't think it's just them saying, you know, come here, be your best self, be your best self. I think they really believe, and I know they really believe they can take any player in the league that they like and that fits their system, and they can turn him into the best version of themselves. And that's what's making this run, this Buffalo window, so rare, is that they've been able to keep a staff like this intact for, I mean, we're 4 years running at this point. And you know, Western New York fans, Bills fans throughout the country, you really have to enjoy this because it's not going to last forever. I said this last year too, but I would be stunned if Brian Dable's not a head coach next year. I'd be stunned if Leslie Frazier doesn't get an offer, if Ken Dorsey doesn't get a coordinator job. Like, it would be, it is something that you don't see at the NFL level. This is something maybe you see at the college level. It's something you're seeing at Clemson, where Brent Venables and Tony Elliott have been there for, I mean, nearly a decade, but you don't see it at the NFL level. So I think a lot of that is a tip of the cap to Buffalo's coaching staff and their ability to develop and coach players, to identify elite traits, like you said, and extract the most out of whatever player, prospect, veteran, you name it, that walks through those doors in Orchard Park.
We got a super chat here from Earth Rocker. He says, because we play base nickel, does it make more sense to have more on the D line? I'm going to let Nate and then Marcel hit this real quick, and then we'll let Marcel get out of here and get on with his evening. Nate, what do you think of Earth Rocker's super chat here?
Yeah, I think maybe the argument, and I know I don't want to get Bruce going. We're starting to wind down. This is like, you don't want to ruse the baby, but I would say if you're playing more nickel, you might want more corners, right? And this isn't a defense that relies. This isn't a defense that relies heavily on man coverage. Whereas like a team like the Dolphins, or you start to go across these teams that really play a lot of heavy man, those are the teams that I feel like maybe you want to carry some extra defensive line, particularly if you have specialty pass rush style guys. I think the Bills, I mean, they run almost exclusive quarters. They run some Tampa too, but this is a quarters defense. And for me, you would think you'd want to really load up on defensive backs that could bring some versatility. But I think that it makes sense that this team, based on the needs they felt they needed to create diverse ways to get to the quarterback. But and Marcel will echo this, I know, is it's not just about getting to the quarterback. And I think the types of players the Bills got proved that. I think they want to be able to clog up passing lanes with length, with athleticism. And I think part of being a good defender in passing lanes at the defensive line position is having a really good understanding of spacing and where you are and how to affect the quarterback more than just, making big hits.
I agree. And I believe, and correct me if I'm interpreting your question wrong, Earth Rocker, but if you're saying, like, does it make more sense to have more depth on the defensive line? I think no matter what your base coverage is, it makes sense to have depth at that defensive line. because you're going to rotate defensive linemen more than you're going to rotate offensive linemen. You can take advantage of that lack of conditioning. You can take advantage, just having that relentless pursuit is priceless. And as Mario Addison told us, I believe it was last week, he was used in a lot. I don't want to say more consistent. He played a lot more snaps than I think he was expecting to play. He is a pass rush specialist, and he's having to play on. He was having to be a run
first
stopper.
and second down guy, right?
A 3-down defensive end, and that's not what he came here for. And that's not what we even heard Brandon Beane say after the draft, that like we can now use Mario in certain specific type of roles and specific situations. Like I think no matter what base coverage you're in, you want depth at the defensive line. You want versatility at the defensive line. I mean, we haven't even talked about that incredible personnel grouping from the Lions game of Epinesa, Basham, Obata, and Rousseau on the same line. That is, I mean, to have that kind of talent to play with. I even asked Sean about it. I was like, you've never been able to do that throughout your entire time in Buffalo. And I don't think he was. I kind of see it in his eyes that he was like, he's excited. I think they're excited about what the pieces they have on there. But no, Nate is right. I think you're, if you're playing nickel, you better be deep at corner, and that is something that Buffalo has, as long as I've been here. That's something Buffalo has not been. They've got one guy who can replace the guy opposite Tre'Davious White, the player opposite Trey, on any given week, whether it's Levi and Kevin Johnson, or it's Levi and Josh Norman, or it's Levi and Dane Jackson. Like they don't go too deep at corner. If Taron Johnson gets hurt, maybe Cam Lewis can fill the spot. Maybe Saran Neal can do it. But the secondary has always kind of been one injury away from. Yeah, I don't want to say disaster because that's a little dramatic, but they've been one injury away from having real problems. And that's been that. I think that's why a lot of people, including myself, were calling for a cornerback to be drafted this past April. But no, either way, to answer your question, no matter what base coverage you're in, you're going to want to have waves of defensive linemen to attack opposing quarterbacks.
MLJ, dude, I appreciate you so much. Thanks for hopping on with both Bruce and myself. As always, we appreciate you. Go enjoy your Friday night. Thanks for making time for us over here at the Food for Thought podcast. We really appreciate you, bro.
Of course, man. I appreciate y'all having me on. I love both of y'all. One day I'll see Bruce Nolan's face again. Really thought it was going to be tonight. Like I said, I'll get over it. I'll have a beer. I'll forget. I hope. But it was good being on with you guys, man. Like I love talking football with you.
Appreciate you, Marcel. Marcel Louis-Jacques, ESPN Bills beat reporter, joining us there on Food for Thought. Bruce, the lasting thing that I think we should probably bring up and talk about here that I think Marcel sort of elegantly stated. They are very thin, and I don't have to tell you, they are very thin at the cornerback position in terms of depth. If you want to talk about polar opposites of depth on the defensive line and depth in the defensive backfield, we're talking about opposing ideas here. And I think the one thing that he mentioned, and maybe I'm going to do the thing that I read maybe more. Maybe I'm reading more into some of the things that assistant coaches or the coaches on this coaching staff have to say. But I'm trying to think of it's a Kroll show. If anybody here watches the Kroll show, a good quote from there is, when he speaks volumes. And when these coaches, they speak, I take a lot away from what they have to say. And when Leslie Frazier talked a lot about Saran Neal and creating packages and trying to find unique and creative ways to get him on the field. But hey, we got Taron there, and Taron has really proven to be that lockdown nickel corner, but he plays a physical brand of football. And maybe we see some Neal because we want to give Taron Johnson some opportunities to get blows during the game and during long drives. So for me, Saran Neal has to develop into a really good replacement level player for this team. Losing Dean Marlowe, this is a guy that can play outside corner, can play slot corner, can play safety for you. He really brings that versatility. So he acts as a fifth safety and also as a secondary sort of Swiss Army knife. So I think for me, if he can step into almost like that Micah Hyde role that Green Bay lost back when the Bills signed him, that would be a huge advantage for the Bills, and particularly Leslie Frazier. And, ultimately that would probably mean Saran Neal gets paid and goes elsewhere. Saran Neal getting paid to go play in a position and become the next Micah Hyde would be the best case scenario for this Bills team, because I think they really need that guy off the bench. They need a sixth man in that defensive backfield. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you're never going to convince me not to pound the table for any more defensive backs. I told myself this year was going to be the year I was not going to get sucked in to a draft a corner high, and I did it again. In my predictive mock draft, I did it again. And it's nice that I have people like Logan in the comments who said flying on a plane right now and refused to miss the show. Just wanted to tell you guys, keep up the great work. Logan came with a super chat. Logan, I really appreciate it, man. We have been doing this for a couple weeks now. The response to this show has been unbelievable. It has been unbelievable. You guys have been tweeting at me and telling me how excited you are about the show. And I'll level with you. The way that you get hyped up for the show is a little bit like the way I get hyped up every year thinking the Bills are going to draft a corner, and it never happens. And every year I tell myself I'm not going to get sucked in, but yet I do. And so next year, I will probably happen again. I will get sucked in. This year, I thought my predictive mock draft had Tyson Campbell to the Bills in round 2. He ended up going, of course, to the top of round 2 to the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I do think that having additional defensive backs is never going to be a bad thing, but I do think that the actions of this regime indicate to me that they are team pass rush versus team coverage. I'm not saying they don't value coverage. I'm saying that I think that they think the game is won and lost in the trenches up front. And because of that, they think that if you have the chicken, you can get the eggs. It's a chicken and the egg conversation, right? And some people think the egg comes first. Some people say the chicken comes first. It's the whole thing. Well, they're clearly team chicken because in my metaphor that's going on in my head that I'm literally creating out of thin air right now, pass rush is chicken and coverage is egg. Mm-hmm. So I think that that matters for this discussion to understand that philosophically the organization appears to just believe that pass rush is more important than coverage. That doesn't mean that they're not going to draft a corner. It just means from a prioritization standpoint, I don't think it will be as high. So we've got a few minutes. Now, as we are wrapping up with some mailbag and some Q&A, go ahead, hit us with your questions in the comments. Hit us with a super chat if you want to make sure that you get our attention. And while you are doing that and hitting us with some questions and we are answering them, we got a mailbag. Nate, we've got some mailbag to talk about.
Hell yeah, we do.
And it was from @BuffaloChina on Twitter, who sent me an email and said, I just saw a tweet that asked if Josh Allen was going to be the best quarterback in the NFL in 2021, and it got me thinking. There's reason to believe that Josh can still be better. He's already identified areas where he needs to improve, and it's reasonable to believe that his methodical approach will bear fruit again. His trajectory may still point up. My question is this: has his competition plateaued? Do you think the other elite quarterbacks in the NFL are known quantities, or are they still getting better? Specifically, I wonder about Mahomes. Was he significantly better in 2020 than 2019? And do you think he'll be better in 2021? So I will let you take this first because you're already chomping at the bit. Nate, what you think?
I don't mean for this to come off as a hot take, and I hope it doesn't. Mahomes is the best quarterback in the league. He is who he is. He's playing at his ceiling pretty consistently. I don't think there's more room up there. And that's not a knock. If he plays like this for the next 5 to 10 seasons, he's going to be the best quarterback of all time. I don't care how many rings Tom Brady has. Patrick Mahomes will be considered the best quarterback of all time if he stays on this trajectory of consistency. And hold on, we got to bring this one up. Yeah, he might be terrible tonight, but I don't care. He could be terrible in as many preseason games as he wants. G.Seals says in our comment section. But I think for me, there's maybe a conversation to be had about Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson. Are those two players that we haven't, particularly as a passer for Lamar Jackson, and particularly as an overall, I can carry my team, I can be the reason we're winning, instead of what Greg Gabriel said today when I was hosting the afternoon show with Bulldog. We were talking about Andy Dalton in Chicago, and Andy Dalton's the kind of quarterback. He said there's two kinds of quarterbacks you can win with, and quarterbacks that will win, that actually win games for you, not that you can win when you put everything around them. And I think if you're talking about quarterbacks in the league right now, I think you have to really surround Baker Mayfield with that type of talent for them to be successful. So for me, I think the only other guy I look at is Baker Mayfield, Lamar Jackson. Maybe you want to put Ryan Tannehill in there, but I think we've seen the best of Ryan Tannehill. Again, not a shot at Tannehill. It's pretty damn good, the best of Tannehill. I think he's a top 5, top 7 quarterback in the league when you have top Tannehill playing. And now he's got Julio Jones. That's a scary proposition if Arthur Smith And the loss of him doesn't really turn that offense sideways. But I think for me, it's because I don't know quite yet if we've seen Baker Mayfield's ceiling, if we've seen Lamar Jackson's ceiling as a passer. So for me, I think the rest of the AFC, you know what you have. The question is, I mean, at least now, I think we've got a couple years to see maybe Trevor Lawrence play out, and some of these other pieces can Wentz go back to the player we saw in 2015, 2016? Because if that's the case, he's got an argument. I know people don't want to say, hear me talk about, Carson Wentz being in that conversation, but the fact of the matter is if he is that player that we saw earlier on in his career. So in the AFC, yeah, I mean, and then you talk about the NFC, who are we talking about that's going to take a leap? I think we know who we have in Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers. At some point, they've been at this peak for so damn long. When are we going to start to see that start to tip? And typically at the quarterback position this late in their careers, getting into their 40s for Aaron Rodgers and these guys playing it this well deep into their 40s, this isn't going to be a slow and steady leak. When they take a drop, when their game falls, it's going to fall quickly. So on the NFC side of things, is Dak Prescott the guy that we saw for the first 4 weeks before his injury? Is that the guy 500 yards a game, or was that because that team was down and couldn't run the football? So if you're asking me, is Josh Allen the best quarterback in the league? I just have to wonder if we've seen the ceilings from Dak, from Baker, from Lamar. And if we have, then maybe.
I would like to throw a wrench into this little conversation right here. What about Justin Herbert? I think that there's a real possibility that Justin Herbert, I'm a big Brandon Staley fan. I think Brandon Staley is going to do great things in Los Angeles for the Chargers. And I think there's a very reasonable possibility that Justin Herbert could take a significant step this year. Now, I think one of the things that was interesting about Herbert was how good he was under pressure last year. And typically that's a very variable thing. That's not something that has a tendency to stick up
who
year
led the
over
league?
year.
You know who led the league?
Yeah.
Fitzy.
Of course Fitzy did.
Fitzy.
Of course Fitzy did.
It's a random thing, to your point.
It is. It is absolutely a random thing. However, it was also his first year. So you think even if that gets worse, but his performance from a clean pocket gets better. And mind you, the Chargers completely rebuilt their offensive line. We're talking a lot about the Kansas City Chiefs rebuilding their offensive line this offseason. The Chargers rebuilt theirs too. I mean, Corey Linsley is a significant addition to that. Their first round pick is a significant addition. They did a lot of work on that offensive line. So even if he's not as good under pressure this year as he was last year, he may not have to be. He may not be under pressure as often as he was before. So I think Herbert's going to be fun to watch for this. But like you said, there are multiple different types of quarterbacks, as Greg Gabriel talked about earlier today on WGR. And specifically, it's, quarterbacks who you're winning because of and quarterbacks you're winning in spite of. And when you look at the quarterbacks you're winning because of, Justin Herbert's one of those quarterbacks. So I think he counts for this conversation.
I like his addition to the conversation. I think he probably fits under that group of emerging young quarterbacks. I think time in the league means something to me about Baker and particularly Lamar, but more so Baker, because I think Baker's an enigma. I genuinely, as a guy that liked Baker, that never thought in a million years a team would have the gonads to draft him first overall. I'm happy that he was drafted first overall. I still believe that if I could go back in that draft class, I think I still would pick Baker Mayfield first overall, because I love his intangibles. He just has yet to really put it together for a full season. We saw it in the second half. He's the only guy outside of, I think Herbert is a really strong or a follow-up second season away from being in the conversation with Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes. Do you believe that? I mean, is Herbert a above average, a top 10 type performance season in his second year in a back-to-back situation away from being mentioned in the Lamars and the Josh Allens and the Mahomes?
Yeah, I do think so. I mean, if any
He's
of you
not there now though, right?
No, I don't think he's there right now. For those of you who do not know, I have a proprietary quarterback metric that I utilize to attempt to ascertain how a quarterback performed holistically. And if you rank the quarterback stew, QB stew is the name of it. If you rank all the quarterbacks by their QB stew, Justin Herbert was 12th in the league this past year, right in front of Baker Mayfield. Baker Mayfield was 13th in the league. So I do think that he was an above average quarterback this particular year. And I think another top 10 finish from him. And you're having those discussions with him, like you're having the discussions with, Derek Carr and Russell Wilson and Tom Brady and Ryan Tannehill and Patrick Mahomes and Deshaun Watson, all the people who are in the, hey, these are really good players sort of discussion. So for me, I do think he's probably a year away from that discussion, but if you want to talk about quarterbacks who are peers to Josh Allen, specifically, obviously, we have a tendency to think about AFC quarterbacks when we think that. So when you think about that, I think Herbert needs to be at least discussed for this discussion.
Agreed.
G Seals in the comment section says the teams that have overhauled their O-line might not see results for 3 or 4 games into the season. Absolutely possible. You might see that
Maybe
gelling
longer.
scenario. No question. I believe it. I absolutely
and
believe
by
it.
the way, I'm not, and take what you will from a preseason game, but watching that first quarter with Patrick Mahomes, I mean, he was on the run a lot against a defensive line that doesn't have Jordan Phillips or J.J. Watt or Chandler Jones. So, yeah, I would start to worry a little bit because that's an offensive unit that on the left side looks to be young, or well, at least at Orlando Brown Jr. and Joe Thuney. It looks to be a very solid left side. I've got questions about Orlando Brown Jr. That right side, including the center, right guard, right tackle, have never played a regular season NFL game together. And I think there's 4 overall NFL starts between the 4 of those guys. So, listen, I think that Kansas City had to remake that offensive line based on the injuries that they sustained last year. I'm not sure they're better though. I like Joe Thuney. Listen, this was a team that was desperately trying to go get Trent Williams, and they were willing to pay. I'm almost a little upset that they didn't get Trent Williams. They didn't pay out of the ass for Trent Williams. That would have been really interesting to see them put another $40+ million contract on the books. Another, what was it, 45 or something? It was something stupid. $50 million for Trent Williams, or it might have even been more than that. But yeah, I guess my point here is I think there's a couple of teams. The Ravens are another one that are going to take some weeks to gel at that offensive line position. You talked about Los Angeles as well. You talked about the team that's going to be walking into Highmark Stadium in week 1, the Pittsburgh Steelers, who are going to have a completely remade offensive line. So a lot to make of this league remaking, a lot of the teams at the top remaking their offensive lines, and to see all the continuity that the Bills were able to retain this year going into the 2021 season.
Ladies and gentlemen, we did it. Another successful 4-course meal. Hors d'oeuvres, appetizer, main course, dessert. I hope you're full. I hope you're satisfied. I hope you're happy. Nate, any final words?
Yeah, so I think we're going to make a tradition of you doing a weekly impression. And I think the people deserve to hear you sign off as Barack Obama.
Oh, okay. All right. So I guess I'm doing that now. Okay. So I guess we're going to sign off as Barack Obama, as Bruce Nolan for this. Okay, here we go. And that's the way the cookie crumbles. I'm Bruce Nolan, Buffalo Rumblings.